Greetings, Capsuleers, and welcome to the fourth episode of Hydrostatic Podcast. I am your host, Ashtarothi, and I am once again greeted by, let me just try that one again. What am I?
I can do wonders with editing.
Joined by.
We are really good at this. Don't choke.
Greetings. God damn it. Greetings, Capsuleers, and welcome to the fourth episode of Hydrostatic Podcast. I am your host, Ashtarothi, and I am joined once again by Lockfox and Fyridian, which is good because today is Industry Day, and I know very little about industry. In fact, I know so little that I have decided that a special guest is in order to help us fully understand what's going on. For that, I bring you our special guest, Blake, who is the author of K162space.com. How you doing, Blake?
Hey, I'm doing great, thanks.
So, Blake, before we go into everything else, why don't you introduce yourself, say who you are, what you do, why we should listen to you, and what you've been up to.
Hey, my name's Blake. I'm the main author at K162space.com. I've been playing EVE since 2008 or so, I believe. Mainly specializing in industry, mining, trading, and what I do is kind of do proof of concept stuff and mainly blog about it. Post a lot of spreadsheet stuff, a lot of analyses, and just kind of share information. Kind of don't really keep much secret.
Awesome. Yeah, so as you guys can probably have guessed already, that today is not going to be your average space shooting, combat discussing, lol fit laughing kind of podcast. We're going to be discussing, in particular, the industry changes coming in Cryos. We're going to talk a little bit about the way industry is now and the way the industry is moving forward, and kind of what we think about the direction the industry is going in our mechanics drill down. And we're going to also discuss the Inferno drug, which is one of the pieces that was discussed as being a key component to one of the pieces of the new industry changes. But before we get into all of that, let's talk about how things have been going. So, Lockfox and Phi, how you guys doing?
Doing great.
Things have been okay.
Any news to report?
I'm a little worried about this industry stuff because I don't think I know any more than you do, Ash.
We'll find out, I guess. All right, well, to open you guys up, once again, as always, we have a question for the panel. The question is definitely going to hinge towards the two people who are industry gurus. But the question is, what segment of the Cryos changes do you find most interesting? And which are you most excited about? Now, that can be the same thing, or that can be two different things. So let's start with Phi.
So, the one that I find the most interesting, and Lockfox and Blake, please feel free to jump in and correct me when I'm totally wrong. But it looks to me like Tech 2 BPOs, which have been around in the game for a long time and are a huge source of wealth for those who have them, and a huge source of pain for a lot of people who don't have them. It sounds like invention is really going to catch up to T2 BPOs. And to me, that's interesting because it means more that people are succeeding based on their own work rather than having won a lottery at some point prior to 2007. And then the thing that I'm most excited about, and you guys are both going to hate me for this, is the fact that blueprints are going to be required to be inside of the POS in order to have actions performed upon them. So previously you could leave your BPO in a station in the same system and remotely research or manufacture from it at the POS. And so now that's going to have to actually be at risk in the POS. And as somebody who likes to shoot things, that makes me excited.
Now, I know that by saying that you are literally throwing the gauntlet, or figuratively throwing the gauntlet down to Locke, because I know that that's a sticking point for him, which we'll go into later.
Yeah, and I know that it's right now the implementation doesn't make a whole lot of sense for heavy industry corps, but that idea is more interesting to me than totally invulnerable BPOs sitting around.
All right, I'll go next. The thing that's got me most interested and most kind of excited, it's kind of weird, but being a developer myself and being a UI UX kind of guy, I I really do like the new UI and the fact that they're looking at the UI. Um, I kind of wish that they were catching up to 2014 instead of 2008 when it comes to, development of good UI design. But, progress is progress. So I know that when I first got into industry, all of the numbers and all of the fiddly little bits in the tutorial really turned me away, and I never really looked at it again. Um, I've liked crafting systems in other games, but something just didn't hook me. And I think that having a nice, clear layout that lets me, see, oh, look, these things are affecting this thing, which is letting me create this other thing. Like, I think that that's what, at least for people like me, is it's going to take to make it so that we decide the industry is worth pursuing, which is really kind of the point of this whole thing. Let's go with Locke, and we'll round it out with our guest at the end.
All right. The the part I'm most excited about is just the breadth of the changes. It's a huge change for what has, for a lot of people, become a solved problem. And Mina talked about this a lot in Ali's stream on Saturday, that the system should have a lot of what he calls good complexity, where it's complex, but there's enough information that you can make informed decisions and compete, as opposed to randomly pressing buttons and hoping that things go well, or that it isn't complex at all and everyone just has solved problems, that we end up in a stagnant state where once you've figured out all the secrets, you just print ISK, or you don't print ISK, depending on where it is. So beyond any individual change, I like all that. And then speaking on the couple of points so far, one, the BPO change I find interesting only because it's such a crying point for so many people. They tend to be really have this idea of what a T2 BPO is, and when you actually run the numbers, it's nowhere close to what people think they are. They end up being closer to like a bond as a financial product than a real leg up industrially. And this change will actually just nerf the living crap out of BPOs, bringing them to the level of invention, and then we'll go from that baseline to improve to improve outcomes. So I find that really interesting. And then second, the POS change. I'm not against risking blueprints, because I'm all for choosing to risk something for a reward. It's that I shouldn't fear my corp mates when I do it. Like, I should fear enemies more than I fear my corp mates. And the current way things are set up, I'm less worried about that now, since there's a lot of the other problems have been identified and sort of worked out. But it's definitely a thing, and it's going to be big, and it's going to be interesting, and it's going to be really hard to predict what's going to happen.
Interesting, really hard to predict, and possible corporate espionage. That sounds exciting, but we should definitely come back to that during the mechanics drill down. So, Blake, what about you? What are you most excited about? What do you think is the most interesting coming in Cryos?
Yeah, I've got a few things. The first is just I'm really excited to actually have BPO information exposed over the API. Because previously I was just manually recording everything in a database table, what my ME levels were. It was just completely awful. I'm kind of excited at the sheer scope of what they're doing when they're trying to take sort of high, medium, and low sec and null or high load null. They're trying to add differentiators. The teams aspect, I can't wait to see how people are going to manipulate that. I see a lot of potential for people to sort of outbid and draw certain teams to different areas. Like, I kind of want to see like a low sec capital hub form with a team that's like manipulating the market. That's what I want to see, and I think there's a lot of potential for that.
The teams are very exciting.
Oh, the teams are making my brain melt on how the heck I'm going to account for them in any sort of tool, because spreadsheets ain't going to cut it.
And that's what makes me excited. All right, so excellent. So I guess without further ado, let's just jump into it. So that was our appetizer, but now let's really dive into this. We have a crap ton of ground to cover. Let's just jump into it. Let's start with the topic of research. Um, and I'm going to try to give what little I can, which is basically like the noob idea of what these things are. And then they're going to correct me and then talk about where it's going. It'll be an exciting experiment. So basically with research, you have a BPO, and that BPO will allow you to produce, or well, that blueprint original, as it's called, BPO, will allow you to produce components, ships, whatever. Um, and there's a certain amount of efficiency within that BPO. And by spending time researching it, you can make that BPO better. So basically, you can spend time copying it, which allows you to actually then produce something, or you can spend something time researching it, which will make it take less time and be more efficient in the long run. So it's either way, it's a time cost, but it's like a long-term investment versus short-term investment.
So the big mechanic change, I mean, that's technically accurate. The mechanic change is that
That's kind of accurate.
instead of having this equation where you had a slope going asymptotically to a 10% added efficiency. Instead, that's going away, and we're getting basically levels for blueprints. So think of when you train a skill, you can train level 1 in a couple of minutes, and level 2 in several minutes, and level 3 in a few hours, level 4 in several days, and level 5 in a week or so. And that sort of sliding exponential scale is coming to blueprints where the level is a direct percentage on what you're saving. So if it's ME1, then you're saving 1% material efficiency. If it's ME5, it's 5%. If you're saving 10%, if you go all the way to 10, which will take an enormous amount of time for a lot of the blueprints, you will save the full 10%. That will be a literal perfect blueprint. No more of this wishy-washy, well, effectively perfect, and you have to look it up. 10 will be a perfect blueprint. That's not exactly correct because of rounding errors. Sometimes a 2 or 3% boost is all you actually need, but functionally it'll be a lot easier to read. The change, and they're also changing the name from production efficiency to time efficiency, just so that it makes more sense as to what the damn name means.
So wait, you just confused me a little bit. You said that sometimes it only 2 or 3% is what you're going to need. Are you saying that sometimes it's just better to only research it so far, or?
Well, so that's always been the case. Like, if you opened up any sort of blueprint calculator or gone on Chucker or Eve Prism or pick your favorite ISK per hour, it tells you the perfect ME. And if you go and you put that ME into the calculator, it'll say that you're saving like that the waste factor has been reduced to like 1.5%, let's say. Let's say you brought a blueprint, some random blueprint to ME50, the way it is on TQ today, and now you have 1.5% wastage. But because of rounding errors, that means that it's essentially perfect. You could keep adding ME to it and keep moving that percentage wastage down, but because of rounding errors, you're never going to see that saved 1 tritanium or whatever the heck the last point got you. So in this case, you still will have the rounding errors, and those will... So this is where things get a little complicated. Rounding errors are going to be interesting going forward. They will round out at the full material cost of the job for however many runs you requested. So, if you, for one run, would have 100.3 trit after rounding errors, let's say you've done all the math and it's actually 100.3. If you put in one run, you will use 100 trit. If you put in 1,000 runs, you will use 1,000 and if you put in 10 runs, you'll have 1,003.
Right. So the more runs you do, the higher the total cost, and therefore the more you'll see the true value emerge, basically.
Yeah, so the rounding doesn't happen at single item time, it happens at job time. So that decimal point could move over several values, and you could be ending up somewhere not perfect if you are particularly OCD about it.
So does that mean for some levels of research, blueprints are actually going to become it's going to be more advantageous to do smaller batches than larger bulk batches?
So I think that the important thing to remember is that if it's less than 1%, it's probably not what's driving your cost and probably won't save you a lot of money in the end. So I would advise people to check very thoroughly that it's worth their time to make that rounding error go away. But technically, I want to say yes because you'll get sort of a death by inches thing with job costs, which will come to job costs in a couple of bullet points.
Well, okay. Does Blake have anything else to contribute to this discussion point?
No.
All right. So the other thing that this kind of goes into is all this stuff is going to be involved in POSes a lot. Well, right now, all industry involves POSes quite a bit because slots are rarer now. But that's also going to change too, right?
Yeah, so POSes are going to get interesting, and I don't think the design of it is completely set in stone yet, so if there's anything you read or hear on the podcast now or see on the test server that just makes you feel like it's pants on head retarded, get on the forums and complain about it. Since we're getting rid of slots, there is nothing stopping you from putting up a small tower with one lab and doing all of your jobs through that one lab. Instead, what they've added is that for every additional active lab, it should help bring down the job cost modifier, bring down the job costs, so that you can save on the additional fees you'll be paying when you're doing industry. But
So,
POS math
well-
is broken on the server right now, or was the last time I checked on Saturday, so take it all with a grain of salt. It's going to need to be tested all out. It's still fluid.
Now,
So-
I know that this was a big concern for you because while control of stuff inside of a station is fairly easy, control of stuff inside of a POS is substantially more challenging. Has that opinion changed at all since this has started to go live?
Well, since we only need one active lab to do all of the jobs we want to do, I'm reasonably happy that I can control access at my POS, and I have less to fear from my teammates. So technically, yes. According to Salpoon in the chat that we're doing live, they're also the whole POS rights thing is still on the table for the next cycle of development. So don't expect things to stay, if they are broken, stay broken for long.
So what you're saying is that if your corporation is trusting each other and have their BPOs in a POS, you should act quickly and steal them now before they fix the permission system.
Well, any corporation that has their rights competently set up should not be afraid of corp theft. That's my underlying opinion simplified. And I think that with the way things are right now, and with the way things are promoted on the forums, I believe that that's reasonably covered. It could be better. I would. There's a lot of different changes I would love to see, and I don't think we have time to go into all of them. But I'm reasonably happy that the emergency that I was crying about when they were announced has been successfully taken care of.
Cool. All right. Well, on that note, let's go to UI. So the old UI was a complete click fest that was very difficult to understand. I'm not even going to go into it. If you guys want to know what the old UI was like, um, just go on and try the tutorial missions or the agent
Career missions.
career missions. There you go. So the career missions for industry, and you'll see what I was talking about. There is a dev blog. It's actually fairly old now. That kind of showed off the new UI, but the new UI is now live and active in Sissy, correct?
Yes, it is.
All right. So why don't we start with K162 or sorry, Blake. Do you have any thoughts about the UI?
Yeah, I mean, besides the sort of size of it right now, it's going in a good direction. There's a lot more like user feedback when something's processing or clicking or running. There are small sort of indicators that are there that are really beneficial, I think, to people that are trying to figure out what the heck they're actually doing or what's running. Before it was just sort of kind of a columnized spreadsheet with a sort of status row. And I'm very glad to see that kind of go away.
So am I. The other thing that gets me is like, and I noticed this right away, and other people said that I was dumb and that it wasn't really valuable. But you can actually like save the state of a build and load it and run it later. So if you like, I want to build 7 Punishers, you can set up all of the stuff to do that and whatnot, and then it'll automatically save it. And then you can come back later and say, I want to build those same 7 Punishers again, and just like with 2 clicks, do another set of those. Is that pretty much how it works? Is that a good thing?
That's as advertised, but I haven't seen it working yet.
I think that would be super cool because, you know, then I can do all my spreadsheets and figure out what my optimum number of things are based on my research and blah, blah, blah. And then I can just build that over and over again. And that sounds cool.
The other thing that's really worth noting for the new UI is that it is designed to be everyone friendly. So by casting a wide net, you're going to piss off a few people just because you can't design for everybody. But the idea that you can load up a blueprint, you can experiment with it without even buying the blueprint. You can go and experiment with the numbers inside the client. It'll give you a breakdown of material costs. It'll give you a breakdown of job costs. It'll give you a breakdown of production times. It'll let you twiddle all of the knobs to figure out what's going on. And the fact that that'll be in the client for people means that it's like when we brought fittings, the fitting info pane into the game. We went from, well, I think that's what it is, to like, oh, if I put this module on, now I can see the thing, and now I can, do all of these things that I didn't understand before.
It's funny that you said with the fitting stuff, because I was just thinking that, like, that's all fine and good for the industry guys to get that level of love. But now I definitely want that I want an in-game ship builder. I don't have to go to EFT or not EFT, but what? Yeah, EFT or anything like that, PIFA. I can just in the game be like, I want to see what happens if I switch this module out for this other module that I do not own, and now I want to save it as a fitting. That would be amazing.
It would. So the couple of points I've made on my own notes has been, one, the UI is pretty big. If you're playing on a laptop, I severely, strongly advise you to go get the test client and try it out on your build. because that's going to be a limiting factor, I think, in some people. It's just the size of the window is gargantuan. Uh, Also, it's worth clicking around some of the stuff because as much as pictures are great, interaction is so much better. And the fact that you can hover over each of the bullets and like really complicated industry stuff like T2 and really drill down into this stuff, I think is going to be really valuable for all of our, like everyone who said, "Oh, I can't do industry because I'm not an industry guy." There's still some hiccups that need to be cleaned up, and there's still the Teams thing I still think needs a lot of love. But in all, the fact that it just feels stupid proof, and I really like it. I'm hoping it'll be a little more bulk friendly because I haven't had a chance to go try and put in like the 200 jobs I can put in simultaneously. But it's a big step up from where we were, where it was click this, click this, click this. Okay, now repeat that 10 times. Now repeat this 10 times. And oh shit, there goes an hour of my life because I clicked on all that crap.
It was fairly miserable. So the other thing that I want to point out, and we talked about this a little bit earlier, but this development is actually happening a little bit differently than previous develop, or at least the testing of the development is happening a bit differently than what we've come to expect. I mean, obviously they have the stuff on Sissy, but whereas in a lot of other things like ship rebalance and whatnot, um, we've seen like maybe weekly builds, maybe an extra one if they're planning on doing a big event to test the server or something like that. But in this case, we're seeing basically their nightlies, right? Like the stuff is changing every day.
Yeah, I think that speaks to CCP's adoption of just the agile project methodology, where someone is committing changes, it's rolling into a build, the build gets pushed, and that's what we're seeing. And I've worked with agile people or agile project management teams, and I'm seeing CCP completely adopt that strategy now. And I feel over the past year and a half, they've become really strong at it.
It's interesting because actually CCP has been an agile development shop for as long as I know. Um, but yeah, you're right. They're definitely kind of hunkering down and saying, well, we actually need to be agile in more than just how we assign issues to one another, which is pretty cool. Although I was also thinking that it's possible that the kind of people that give feedback and are interested in giving feedback for industry are just the right kind of people for this sort of thing. Like the people that just sit there and do spreadsheets and do these weird analysis. Not saying that you guys are weird or anything, but you are a little bit. Uh, but you can. Those are the people that you want to be looking at your stuff as early as possible and analyzing it as deeply as possible. Whereas, like a new ship, like people, you might want to give people a little bit of time to work with the balance or whatever, but you certainly don't want to give people like your nightly thoughts on something because people will they'll lose their mind.
Plus, flying a ship is also a lot more skill dependent than industry, and I mean real life skills here. Where if you can take a ship that's fitted identically and put it into two different players' hands and have a very different time. But if you throw industry into two people's hands with the exact same components and the exact same, all of that stuff, those jobs will turn out the same, and the fight between the two ships won't.
Yeah,
Well,
industry is much more mechanical.
It's worth I guess bringing up that so Ali Arias, who's on the CSM, has been doing Korea streams as well, and her perspective is this whole I've never done industry because industry is just not something us killers can do, right? It's that there is a gulf between doing industry and killing people, and either you can spend your time making money or you can spend your time killing people, and that has been traditionally the way Eve has always gone. And so if you've really dedicated yourself to killing people, you just sort of write off the whole industry thing as, that's just spreadsheets and math, and all I really want to do is space violence. I know there's plenty of people out there who do both. I just, by and large, it's been, oh, I don't understand that spreadsheet stuff. And so it's worth getting the perspective of both the megacorp, the high-powered industry guy, as much as it is to get the newbie, because we both have to live with this system. And if we get a system that I am 100% happy with, the game will suck.
Do you think that right now, the way that industry looks, it's something, because, I stopped doing industry 3 or 4 years ago, I think, maybe 2 years ago. Is it going in a direction, or is it in a state right now that I'm going to want to come back to?
I think there's still going to be a bar to jump over. I think there's going to be more decisions to be made. So it will not be a rote press button, receive bacon thing like it has been. It should move on to, now I will have to be very conscious about what I'm picking to produce. And if that's the kind of thing that you enjoy doing, if you enjoy solving the problem and adapting as your industry system becomes too expensive and having to move your operation, and that team would make this build so much better, so why don't I go grab that team? Like, if all of that operation sounds like an engaging, deep experience, then you're going to want to do industry. If you're just looking for your push button, receive bacon to pay for your PvP habit, I don't know if you'll be as happy, but you should be less annoyed when you have to do it.
So it sounds to me, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, that it sounds like functionally industry has not changed that much, but it sounds like they've gone from being a means of making money, a solvable puzzle, to instead now it is a game. It's a compelling thing that needs to be continuously resolved and not just like spreadsheeted out.
Yes, is that your spreadsheets will get you a good chunk of the way there, but the best people who will be making the most money will need additional tools, additional understanding, and additional activity to make sure that they are actually optimizing the system. So it's like going from, if you're doing incursions, going from like vanguards, where any Joe Schmo almost can just join in a vanguard fleet, and it's just sort of press buttons, things are okay. But if you really want to get into incursions big time, then you have to bury yourself in the meta, and you're following the incursions as they spawn, and you're getting in HQ fleets, and you're flying with the people who know what they're doing. And so I'm hoping that we're heading in that direction. I still am worried that there's not going to be as much cooperative industry work yet, but I won't put that nail in the coffin until there's more testing done.
Okay, so I got another question, and this is for all of you guys. It's more of a prediction that I'm requesting. So right now, there's a lot of good podcasts and a lot of good blogs out there, and some of them are more general focused, like we are. Some of them are much more focused. So, like Down the Pipe is wormhole oriented. Actually, Wormhole is a really good example. They have a lot of podcasts and blogs that focus on that play style. However, other ones like Incursions don't really have a lot of voice in this kind of arena, and part of it is because of the fact that in its essence very simple. There's a puzzle, it has been solved, you get taught how to do it by somebody, and then you just go do it. Do you think that these changes are going to make it so that we will start seeing more people discussing the industry meta, like in podcasts and stuff? Are we going to get ISK, the podcast, back? Because I really do want it.
So, industry has always been a great blog topic, just because who doesn't love some graph porn? But the day-to-day trying to produce content like a show is incredibly difficult because of the time required to farm out the data to actually make those predictions. So I have a hard time imagining that that will become a lot better. I think the teams leads to an element of somewhat secrecy, and I still think there's going to be the I have solved the problem my way, and it's my secret sauce, and you can, and if you try to steal it from me, I will hunt down your family. So I don't know. I think there'll be more to talk about, but I have a hard time believing that it will be a weekly topic.
Well, Blake, if anybody talks about industry a lot, it's you. Do you feel differently about this? Is this going to just change how you talk about it?
Yeah, it's going to change a lot. I mean, when I first went into wormholes and a lot of the mechanics weren't documented, I mean, I first started the blog to sort of get those mechanics out there and share experiences with people and play styles. So, I mean, I talk to Fox on GChat pretty much every other day, and right now we just have a bunch of question marks. And I think once we start to get some answers to that, I'm going to talk about them.
And then I guess as a minor follow-up, do you think this is going to be the end of the industry changes? Is Cryas going to be up? Industry solved. We're good. We're going to revisit it in another 6 years, or do
Well,
you
do
think this is
you
the beginning of something?
Well, do you want what I want or what we have seen from CCP's history? You know, those are two they're two different paths.
Those are two different paths. But given the current atmosphere among like the way things are going, because there is a lot of things that they are iterating on multiple times recently and continuing to develop, and they are kind of getting into that mentality. So do you think this is going to be one of those continuous development things, or do you think this is a feather in their cap so they can move on?
I'm kind of taking the wait and see attitude with that.
Oh, I'll be more bold. I think that there are some iteration targets that have already been stated. Um, I think that invention's going to, according to Salpoon, we're going to see another invention iteration, because right now there isn't time to completely uproot the mechanic. Uh, so they just sort of have to plug it in as it exists today. I expect that we'll see a reasonable. We should see something new, but I honestly couldn't speculate on what it does. Also, I think the teams aspect has a lot of targets for iteration as well. And then third, I think that the last thing we should be watching for is that industry is going to be a linchpin in this whole developed space narrative that CCP Siegel is selling. So I don't expect it to go by the wayside, but I do expect it to sort of get to become second chair, third chair kind of thing.
Are there any other systems coming up that you think that this UI can be repurposed for? Like, is it a flexible enough UI that you think that it could be used for other things?
Oh man, if I could get it for reaction pauses, I would be so freaking happy.
So then that's possible.
Yeah, so again, I think that there are some other pieces in the development puzzle that have been hinted at and winked at that are going to come loop back to industry. That the industry is going to be touching, but not be we're not going to see industry is changing. We're going to see this is changing, and industry needs to update to follow that change.
Did the team that did the hacking UI also do this industry UI? Because they looked strikingly similar.
All I know is it's arrows, baby.
So then I'm pretty sure that's a yes. Okay, so I got one last question, then we'll go on to our lore topic. And this is a bit more depressing than the last ones, but so do you fear well, let me just phrase this a different way. The industry changes have already been delayed once, and their new their new schedule of cadence of every 6 weeks does allow them to be a little bit softer on the I guess this isn't going to be done now, it can be done later kind of mentality. Do you think that there's any part of this industry changes that will be delayed again? And if so, what impact might it have?
Personally, if there's any sort of big UI tweaks that need to be done, like I kind of fear that the breakout of the bottom half of the window might not make it. But I honestly I am extremely confident that CCP will hit the July 22nd release date. Because
Blake? Oh, sorry, you had something else?
I just that the way that it's on this test server right now, it's usable. Yeah, it's buggy and the math is kind of screwed up, but it's usable. You can put your hands on it and you can install jobs and deliver jobs, and most of the UI elements are there. Like it's there, and it just needs to be finished and polished. So I don't think they're going to miss the target.
Alrighty. Awesome. Blake, do you agree with that?
Yeah, it seems. I mean, the core is there, the mechanics there. I kind of feel like they're holding back on publishing some of the math because I still feel like they're working that out right now. Um, I think they're going to hit it.
Do you guys want to talk about capitals?
It really is the biggest crying point.
All right, well then let's talk about capital.
I'll let Blake start.
Oh, gee. Well, I've been building capitals and low sec just for passive income over the past 3 years, and I've actually closed shop on that. I'm kind of not able to sell my capital BPOs at any good price right now, so that could just give you a clue into what the state of the market is for that. I haven't done the math on what we just saw with the low sec POS module that has the Emmy bonus, but they're really changing the capital production market.
Yeah, it has been sort of the sky is falling for for solo capital producers. The even Parasoja over at Eve Fail has pretty much closed up shop, and he has been prolific in capital production.
Well, this explains why Kirith was so happy to sell his carrier to me. Fair enough.
So, the short answer the short answer that everyone is concerned about is that nullsec will win at capitals forever. And though they do get some advantages because of the refining bonus at Minmatar outposts and build bonuses at Amar outposts, not that you can have two outposts in one system, there is all of those bonuses are mirrored by low sec getting almost as good stuff at POSes. So where your nullsec guy might be able to use the security of a outpost to keep his stuff safe, he will probably pay higher job costs. He will pay higher material costs because there's going to be a low sec only Thucker component lab that will have an ME bonus that will rival the best outpost, I think. And the ending cost should be pretty close. Now, the part that the producers are crying about is that their ISK per effort is going down, because doing it at a POS should be a pain in the butt. It's going to be a lot more risk, and you're going to paint a big target on yourself when someone scans the system and sees Thucker assembly array. I don't think this is as much a sky falling thing as everybody's complaining about, because I think that you can still attach. You only need one of them, right, to go do a build. Since you don't need to care about slots, you can have just one component array, and then you can put it on a large dick star that is hardened against reinforcement. And if you are active in that system, if you hold a system like QCats or like Aderon or like pick a dozen other low-sec entities that live in their system, I think that those modules will become a driving factor for doing segments of industry in low-sec. it's still going to be, it's going to take some time to wash out, but if you're willing to do the work and you're willing to jump in earlier rather than later, I think you're going to end up reaping some pretty decent rewards until everybody else gets their head on straight and joins in the meta and realizes what the whole environment looks like. Also, one extra bonus is that it looks like there's going to be super capital specialized teams, which means that since teams are a publicly viewable asset, you should be able to see where your opponents are building super caps.
Doesn't that also mean that you could, if you wanted to grief your opponents, you could bid on the good supercap teams to prevent them from building supercaps, even if you don't need to build your own?
That's also true.
That's kind of amazing.
Yeah, there's like
So-
supercap and Titan ones, and it was rather hilarious when Mina found out about them.
So what sort of impact is this going to have for wormholes? Because it sounds like, wormholes have the exact right conditions for this to be awesome for them, because they own their system, they obviously live in it, and they have POSes.
So the only problem with wormholes is the export step. So that's the crux of the matter, is that they'll have compressed minerals, which should make logistics easier. They'll be able to do the better build arrays, but the problem is getting out of a wormhole, because you can't sell anything in a wormhole. It's hopefully and the Thucker things can't go in wormholes according to the stream.
Oh, okay. Well, that's a good answer. That seems like a very... they'll be hard-pressed to justify that.
Yeah, it's a little arbitrary for sure.
I believe that wormholes are going to get their leg up by doing compressed ore, and that should be the compressed ore stream that low-sec capital producers need to stay in business.
Well, there you have it.
For those who don't know about capital manufacturing, to build a single capital takes hundreds of thousands of meters cubed of space of minerals to go do them, and traditionally what people have done is use compression by building a T1 item that is much, much smaller than its parts, like surveyed probes or 425 millimeter railguns, which have something like a 50-to-1 compression ratio, shipping those over, reprocessing them with zero waste, and then building in stations. So if you want to build more than like one or two capitals a week, you really need to be able to compress minerals. And so since the only source for compressed minerals going forward is going to be compressed ore, that, and if you're in nullsec, I have a hard time believing that anyone who is living in nullsec really wants to see their high value ores leave nullsec, since they'll want to be turning those into capitals at as high a rate as they possibly can. That means that the best compressed ore will probably be coming out of wormholes.
So, actually, I want to change my answer to what I'm most excited as, which is that refinement change. Like, I understand that a lot of people are mad about it, but I gotta tell you, the idea that I can turn X meter cubed into guns or probes or whatever, which makes it smaller, so then I can transmit it and then break it down into component metals, and that's my import-export business, was stupid. And I'm so glad that is going away, because I guarantee you that there are people that when they heard that, they were like, you know what, this industry game is not for me. That doesn't make any sense, and I don't want to be part of a system that doesn't make sense. So I'm so glad they're fixing that.
Well, that was part of the industry as a solved problem, and so I'm hoping that we move to the point where the smart producer is sitting there looking at all of the different ores that he can go buy and seeing, oh well, now the margin, the added margin on Arcanor is now too high, but I can do a couple extra trips with Veldspar at a much better conversion rate. Like, I'm hoping that becomes part of the metric and the meta.
Yeah, I mean, my reaction to the compression going away was basically, well, it's about time. I mean, it was broken from the start, so I'm glad to see it go. It's going to make things very difficult, but it's got to go.
But it should put margin back into capitals, and so it should be worth investing in the effort to build capitals. Because if you weren't doing compression today, you were a sucker for the margins on caps. Like they were almost at mineral cost if you weren't careful.
All right. Do we have anything else to really hash out, or is this pretty good? I'm sure this is something that we're going to have to revisit. We're definitely not hanging our hat on this topic. But is there anything that we need to discuss tonight?
I don't think tonight, but the thing to watch out for all of our listeners and the next round of information, I think will hinge on us getting a database dump and new API information for the stuff, and that's in the works and should be out soon. Trademark. I hear murmurs that we shouldn't be waiting more than a week or so to see those.
Awesome. So now it's time for our next segment, which is the most anticipated, or at least the most promised, lore segment that we have done so far. So, Phi, please tell us about the Thucker tribe.
The Thucker tribe.
No, I'm just kidding. So a little bit of backstory. While Phi was at FanFest, he was interviewed and whatnot. And at the time, we were already hashing out what our next podcast was going to be. I think we'd only had one in the bag at that point. And so we were like, oh yeah, we could totally talk about, the new industry changes and we could talk about the Inferno drug. It'll be great. And so that's what he said. And then less than a week later, they delayed all of the industry changes. And so we were like, you know what? Once we have enough stuff to talk about industry, then we'll talk about the Inferno drug. And it just kind of became a joke that we were waiting to talk about the Inferno drug. So now it's time.
So one of the big things that's coming out in Cryas is the idea of these teams of researchers that you can bid to move around the galaxy to come help you with your manufacturing and your research. And basically what this is a team of scientists that are paid very, very well to take a drug called IN-06 and colloquially called Inferno that basically allows them an hour-long session of complete lucidity. The Inferno drug was originally found in the wrecks of Talocan stations in wormhole space. And the research that's been done into it so far has shown that it takes advantage of folds in space and inserts what amounts to highly advanced quantum computers into those folds. So it's not even doing all of its calculations in real space. And it does these calculations in order to rearrange your brain, making connections across synapses in ways that basically enhance your ability between concepts. So the best subjects that it's been given to have been scientists who already have broad knowledge in a variety of subjects, and they tend to make huge breakthroughs in this hour-long period. But after that, they become vegetables.
So hold on, before you go any further, you mentioned this in passing, and it's something that either you or hopefully K116 will be able to answer. You said this came from the Talocan wrecks. You want to briefly touch into what those are?
So the Talocan are one of the many ancient races that once inhabited and still sort of maybe inhabit parts of New Eden. They're right up there with the Yanjung and the Sleepers and the other one. They're basically mysterious, highly advanced people who evolved along with the Jove, but didn't survive quite as long as they did.
Sounds like we need to have an alien races segment at some point.
Yeah, definitely. We can promise that one for 4 podcasts too.
There you go. All right, keep going.
The Inferno drug has been used to great effect already, and it's interesting that it's being used for this team's concept in Cryas because it was actually introduced in the expansion that bears its name, Inferno, and it's so far we've been told that it's given Capsuleers two different things. One of them is enhanced EM shielding for Capsuleer ships, and I don't think that actually refers to a real module, but it absolutely is true of the micro jump drive. And the story of how the micro jump drive was created is an interesting story. So we're going to go a little bit different in this lore segment, and I'm just going to go through real quickly that story. It involves an aging Galente scientist named Aki Luisaur, his wife Kia, and his son Rias. He basically gets this offer from an old friend of his, Avagar Zarasir, who was his classmate and is a manager at Duval Laboratories in the Galente Federation. And Avagar offers Aki to use this drug, basically to pay off all of his debts. And he hums and haws, but he talks with his wife and decides that that's really the best thing for him and for their family and for their son Rias. So he goes to Duval Labs. He takes the drug, and a team of scientists watches him and pays attention to what he's doing. And he basically creates the microjump drive out of research that he had stalled on before. So not only does he come up with the theoretical backing for it, he actually comes up with the schematics to build the jump drive and the microcontroller code to make the jump drive work. And just at the last minute, he puts some stuff together in his life rather than in his work and adds a single line of code that no one really knows what it does, but it appears to help the microjump drive work. And then he turns into a vegetable. Avagar, of course, this is the EVE universe, he takes credit for the invention and ends up married to Kia. And so a couple years later, they're on an Opux luxury yacht that he's chartered for a vacation. And that Opux luxury yacht happens to be fitted with a micro jump drive. And the captain of the ship decides that it would be cool to show Avagar how his invention works, because Avagar has never been on a ship fitted with a micro jump drive. And when they spool up the micro jump drive, instead of jumping 100 kilometers forward, that line of code that Aki put into the micro jump drive at the very end scans the passenger manifest, finds Avagar on board, and jumps the Opux luxury yacht into the middle of a sun, totally destroying it. I highly recommend that you read the Chronicle. It's a great example of how harsh the EVE universe is, and it's also got some very exciting scientific breakthrough.
Awesome.
And that's the Inferno drug.
Excellent. That's pretty cool. So with that, I think that about wraps up everything we wanted to talk about. So we've been talking about in the past, we do shout-outs, we do discussions at the end. We kind of wanted to lump it all in together. So we call it closing thoughts. So does any of the panelists have any closing thoughts before we retire for the evening?
I want to point to a post that I made on hydrostaticpodcast.com about how this podcast is made. So if you're interested in that, or you were watching the stream and you wanted to get a better idea of what goes on behind the scenes, highly recommend reading that. And of course, we're still on iTunes and Stitcher Radio, so if you could rate us there, that would be excellent. And that's all I have.
My closing thing would be get your hands on the changes and form your own opinion. Watch the streams that are going on. Read the blogs. It's not just enough to be listening to the dev blogs or listening to this show. There is a lot of information out there, and we've only scratched the surface. So it's a big. There's a lot of stuff to talk about, and we just do not have the time to do it all in one show here.
Yeah, I'll mirror that comment too. Just pay attention to some blog posts and podcasts, because right now, I just have a big question mark, and there's a lot of stuff that needs to be figured out. And I think that's the fun of the game. It's supposed to be fun, right?
No.
Serious business.
It's a second job you don't get paid for. I'm actually going to give a shout out. I don't remember his in-character name. There's an Eve streamer who just started. His name is, or his streamer's name is, I think, the Mahdi. I'll definitely get it to you so that you can put it in the show notes. But he was brand new to Eve. I just, on a lark, went on and hopped on his Twitch stream and handed him some ISK and everything and started and brought him on to Mumble and started helping him out. And that dude is super motivated. He's, I think, Air Force. Really good guy. I'm pretty sure he's joined Rifterlings now. And so I wish him the best of luck. And thank you for coming to EVE Online and spreading the fun that this is.
You want to close it out, Ash?
All right, and with that, I think that'll about wrap it up for this week. We will talk to you guys in about 2 more weeks and have even more interesting things to drill into and maybe a discussion about aliens. Until then, have a good... until then, see you in space.